Nathan Cross tightened his grip on the ship's controls as alarms screamed around him. His rugged face, smeared with sweat and ash, stayed calm despite the chaos. Flames licked at the edges of the cockpit window as his small spacecraft tore through the planet's turbulent atmosphere. He had no choice. Whatever had hit his ship had knocked out navigation and power. He was crashing, and nothing could stop it. With a thunderous impact, the ship smashed into a dense jungle, skidding through twisted trees and strange, luminous plants until it finally came to a smoking halt. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Nathan's ears rang and his vision blurred, but he forced himself to unbuckle and crawl out of the wreckage. His legs wobbled, but he managed to stand, his sharp green eyes scanning his surroundings. The world around him was unlike anything he had seen before. The air shimmered with soft blue light, and the plants seemed to pulse gently, like breathing. Nathan grabbed his emergency pack and a compact plasma cutter, his only weapon, and moved cautiously into the alien wilderness. Each step crunched on leaves that whispered underfoot, and shadows slithered between the trees. His instincts, honed from years of engineering work on far-off colonies, screamed that this place was dangerous. He needed to find shelter, and fast. As he moved through the dense underbrush, a sudden roar sent chills down his spine. Something massive crashed through the foliage, and Nathan spun around, weapon raised. A creature burst into view, twice his size, covered in black, insect-like armor with too many legs and rows of needle-like teeth. It moved like a nightmare brought to life. Nathan stumbled back, his plasma cutter shaking in his hands. The creature lunged, and he fired a desperate shot. The beam grazed the beast's carapace, leaving only a smoking scar. It roared, preparing to strike again, when a flash of silver-blue light cut through the air. The creature's head snapped back, and it collapsed, its body twitching as life drained away. From the shadows stepped Alara, a vision of beauty and danger. Her skin shone with a soft sapphire glow, and her silver eyes held a depth that made Nathan's breath hitch. Long, white hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore woven garments that blended perfectly with the forest. In her hand was a slender weapon, like a crystalline bow, still humming with energy. Alara stared at him, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. Nathan lowered his weapon, not wanting to seem like a threat. "Thanks," he managed, his voice rough. She didn't respond, not with words. Instead, she tilted her head, listening to something he couldn't hear. She turned and gestured for him to follow. Nathan hesitated for only a moment. Alone, he wouldn't survive long, but with her, he might have a chance. He followed as she moved through the jungle with a quiet grace, her feet barely touching the ground. She led him to a hidden alcove beneath a massive tree, its roots forming natural walls around them. As night fell, the world outside came alive with eerie sounds. Nathan sat against the rough bark, his body aching. Alara sat across from him, her eyes never leaving his. She seemed to be studying him, weighing something in her mind. He wanted to ask her so many questions: who she was, what this planet was, why she had helped him. But the weight of exhaustion pulled him into a restless sleep. In the shadows, Alara remained vigilant, her fingers brushing against a small device hidden beneath her garments. She had secrets, deep ones, and as she watched Nathan's chest rise and fall, she knew that bringing him here might change everything. Nathan Cross woke to the soft hum of alien wildlife in the distance. The air smelled fresh, almost electric, as if the entire planet pulsed with energy. His body ached from the crash, but he forced himself up, blinking against the soft glow of dawn filtering through the strange jungle canopy. For a moment, he thought he had imagined everything: the attack, the monstrous creature, and the stunning alien woman who had saved him. But then he saw her. Alara stood a few feet away, watching him with unreadable silver eyes. She moved like liquid light, her sapphire blue skin shimmering as she shifted. She didn't speak, but her presence was calm, controlled, almost expectant. Nathan cleared his throat. Guess I should say thanks for saving my life again. Alara tilted her head, as if studying him, then gestured for him to follow. Without waiting for his response, she turned and disappeared into the thick jungle. Nathan sighed but had little choice. Staying here meant death, whether by starvation or the monstrous creatures lurking in the shadows. He grabbed his emergency pack and followed. They walked in silence, weaving through the towering trees and massive vines that curled like living things. The jungle pulsed with color. Strange plants with bioluminescent veins glowed softly, casting shifting patterns of blue and green light. Despite the beauty, an uneasy feeling sat in Nathan's gut. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. It was as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. Alara finally stopped before a massive rock formation covered in alien symbols. Without hesitation, she pressed her palm against one of the markings. A soft vibration rippled through the air, and the rock shifted, revealing a hidden entrance. Nathan's eyebrows shot up. A secret door. Now, I'm really curious. Alara glanced at him, her expression still unreadable, and led him inside. The moment he stepped through, Nathan's breath caught in his throat. The cave wasn't a cave at all. It was a sanctuary, an ancient structure built from smooth black stone that pulsed with an eerie organic glow. The walls were etched with intricate patterns, shifting and flickering as if alive. This is incredible, he whispered, running his fingers over the carvings. Alara finally spoke, her voice soft yet firm. Verunfall, the last refuge. Nathan turned to her. Last refuge from what? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked deeper into the structure, stopping before a raised platform where a strange device sat, floating just above the stone. It pulsed with the same blue energy he had seen in the jungle. This world is dying, Alara finally said. Something is stealing its life. Nathan frowned. He had noticed it too. The unnatural stillness, the lack of small creatures, the eerie quiet. Stealing it. What does that mean? Alara hesitated. You are not ready to know. Nathan exhaled sharply. Look, I didn't survive a crash and nearly get eaten just to play guessing games. If there's something dangerous here, I need to know. Alara's silver eyes darkened. It is not just dangerous. It is unstoppable. Nathan stared at her. The weight of her words settled like cold metal in his chest. He had no idea what he had stumbled into, but one thing was clear. This planet held secrets far beyond his understanding. And Alara, beautiful and mysterious, was at the heart of it all. Nathan Cross paced the dark stone floor of the Verunfall sanctuary, his mind racing. The strange glow from the walls cast long shadows, and the air felt thick, almost heavy with secrets. He wanted answers, needed them. The crash, the deadly creature, Alara's cryptic words about a dying world, all of it pressed on him like a weight. Alara stood by the floating device on the platform, her silver eyes focused as if listening to something beyond the room. Her long white hair flowed over her shoulders, and the soft sapphire glow of her skin seemed dimmer now. She looked tired, worn. Are you going to tell me what's really going on? Nathan asked, his voice breaking the silence. Or do I just keep following you around until I end up as monster food? Alara's gaze shifted to him. You are braver than most, she said, but bravery alone will not save you. Then tell me how to save myself, he shot back. She sighed, the sound almost musical. This world, Zera, was once vibrant. My people, the Zyran, lived in harmony with it. We drew energy from the land, from the life around us. But then, they came. Nathan's expression hardened. Who? They are called the Vossar, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They are not of this world. They are parasites, traveling from planet to planet, draining life until nothing remains. Nathan felt a chill creep up his spine. So, they're the reason everything feels wrong here. Alara nodded. The jungle is only a shell of what it was. The creatures, like the one that attacked you, are twisted by the Vossar's corruption. Even the air carries their poison. Nathan ran a hand through his dark hair, trying to process it all. How do we stop them? Her lips pressed into a thin line. I do not know. My people fought them for generations, but the Vossar are relentless. Now I am the last of my kind. The weight of her words hung between them. Nathan had seen ruins on other planets, signs of ancient wars and lost civilizations, but this felt different. This wasn't history. This was a living nightmare. A sudden rumble shook the ground beneath them. Dust fell from the stone ceiling, and the glowing patterns on the walls flickered. Alara's eyes widened. They are close, she said. The Vossar feed on energy, and Varunfal is a source they crave. Nathan gripped his plasma cutter tighter. Then we need to leave. No, Alara said firmly. This place holds ancient technology, our last hope. If I can activate it, we might be able to push them back. But I need time. Nathan nodded. Then I'll buy you some. He moved toward the entrance, but Alara stepped in front of him. Her fingers, cool and light, touched his hand. You do not understand. The Vossar are not just physical beings. They invade the mind, twist thoughts, turn allies into enemies. Nathan's jaw tightened. I've seen a lot of things. I won't break. Alara hesitated, then reached into a pouch at her side, pulling out a small crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Take this. It will protect your thoughts for a time. He accepted it, feeling a strange warmth from the crystal. Stay safe, he said, and without waiting for a reply, he slipped out of the sanctuary. Outside, the jungle was darker, as if shadows had swallowed the light. Nathan moved carefully, his every step deliberate. He didn't know what the Vossar looked like, but he could feel them, like a cold breath on the back of his neck. As he stood guard, his mind began to wander. Whispers tickled his thoughts, promises of safety, of warmth, of home. He bit down hard on his lip, drawing blood, using the pain to clear his head. He wouldn't let them in. He wouldn't fail, not with Alara's life, and maybe the fate of this world, hanging in the balance. Nathan stood guard at the entrance of the Varunfal sanctuary, his plasma cutter held tightly in his hands. The once vibrant jungle had turned into a landscape of shadows, where twisted trees loomed like skeletal fingers, and the air itself seemed to hum with danger. Every leaf rustle made his heart jump, but he forced himself to stay focused. Alara needed time, and he would give it to her, no matter the cost. Inside the sanctuary, Alara worked swiftly. Her delicate fingers moved over the glowing control panel, ancient symbols lighting up beneath her touch. Soft pulses of blue and white energy rippled through the stone walls, and the floating device in the center of the platform began to hum with life. She whispered an old Zyran chant under her breath, a melody of hope and strength. Outside, the atmosphere grew colder. Nathan's breath came out in misty puffs, and an unnatural fog began to seep through the undergrowth. He squinted, his instincts screaming at him to move, to hide. But he stood his ground. Then he heard it, a whisper, soft and almost sweet, his name drawn out like a lullaby. Nathan. He turned sharply, the plasma cutter aimed into the fog. Nothing. Only the pale gray mist swirling lazily around the twisted roots. Nathan, come closer. The voice was different now, gentle, familiar. It sounded like his late sister, Lily. His grip on the weapon wavered. Lily, he stammered. The mist coiled, shapes forming within it. A silhouette, small and fragile, like a young girl. Her hair, dark and wavy, her eyes bright with the innocence he remembered. She reached out a hand, her expression soft and warm. Come home, Nathan, she whispered. You don't have to fight anymore. For a moment, he almost stepped forward. His boots scraped against the stone, and he felt the cool fog brush against his skin. But then the crystal Alara had given him flared to life in his pocket, a sharp blue glow that cut through the mist. His mind cleared, and the sweet whisper twisted into a guttural hiss. The silhouette melted, revealing a creature of shadows. Its skin a shifting mass of darkness, its eyes empty voids. The Vossar. It lunged at him, long, clawed limbs slicing through the air. Nathan fired. A sharp blue beam from the plasma cutter seared through the creature's form. It screeched, the sound like metal scraping on stone, and the shadowy body evaporated into smoke. More whispers rose around him, this time sharper, angrier. Shapes moved in the fog, circling him. The Vossar weren't just one. They were many. Parasites, feeding on fear and weakness. Nathan backed toward the sanctuary door, his mind racing. He had to keep them away from Alara. His eyes darted to the small, glowing crystal in his hand. An idea formed. Risky, but it might work. He lifted the crystal high, focusing on its light. "You want this," he shouted into the mist. "Come and get it." The shadows hesitated, then surged forward. Nathan turned and bolted into the sanctuary, his boots pounding against the stone floor. Behind him, the fog poured in, twisting and clawing at the walls. "Alara," he yelled. She looked up, her silver eyes wide. "What have you done?" "They're coming. All of them." Her face hardened, and she turned back to the device. "Then we have no choice. I need more time." Nathan stood in the archway, his plasma cutter glowing hot, his crystal casting a protective light. The fog thickened, and the whispers grew. But he stood firm. He would hold the line. If this was the end, he would make sure the Vossar paid dearly for it. Nathan stood at the sanctuary's entrance, his plasma cutter glowing with a soft blue light. The mist had filled the ancient hall, curling around pillars and slithering over the stone floor. The shadows within it moved, the Vossar hiding just beyond sight, their whispers crawling into his mind. He could feel them pulling at his thoughts, trying to twist his memories and drag him into their world of shadows. Behind him, Alara worked quickly. Her silver hair shimmered in the glow of the ancient device, and her fingers danced over the control panel. Strange symbols shifted beneath her touch, and the hum of energy grew louder. The sanctuary's walls pulsed with light, the ancient technology coming to life under her command. "Nathan, just a bit longer," Alara called over her shoulder. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the strain in it. "No rush," he muttered, his eyes fixed on the mist. "We've only got an army of nightmares at the door." The Vossar began to take shape in the fog. One by one, they emerged, tall, twisted figures with limbs that bent at impossible angles. Their skin was like dark smoke, constantly shifting and reforming. Where eyes should have been, there were only empty voids, and their mouths stretched too wide, filled with rows of needle-like teeth. They moved silently, their bodies gliding over the ground. Nathan took a deep breath, tightening his grip on the plasma cutter. His mind raced, recalling every bit of survival training he had. The Vossar fed on fear and confusion. He had to stay sharp. One of the creatures lunged forward. Nathan fired, the plasma beam cutting through the air and striking the shadowy form. The Vossar let out a high-pitched scream as its body disintegrated into mist. But as soon as it vanished, two more took its place. The creatures circled him, their whispers growing louder. They spoke in voices he recognized, old friends, lost family, voices from the past. Each word was a blade, trying to cut into his sanity. "Nathan, you failed us. You'll never go home. It's all your fault." He gritted his teeth, forcing the voices away. "Not today." Another creature sprang at him. He sidestepped, swung the plasma cutter, and a searing arc of light burned through the fog. The Vossar howled as it was torn apart, but more shadows crept in, filling the gaps, their dark bodies melding with the mist. "Nathan," Alara shouted, "I need your crystal." He didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the glowing blue crystal. It pulsed in his hand, warm and steady, the only thing that cut through the cold of the Vossar's presence. He tossed it to Alara, and she caught it effortlessly. She placed the crystal into the device's core. A deep, resonant hum filled the sanctuary, and the ancient symbols on the walls blazed with light. Energy rippled through the air, and the mist recoiled, the shadows hissing as the light burned them. The Vossar hesitated. Their whispers turned into snarls, and their empty eyes fixed on Alara. They surged forward, a wave of darkness. Nathan stepped into their path. His plasma cutter flared to life, and he unleashed a volley of bright, searing blasts. Each shot pierced the fog, cutting down the creatures as they charged. But they kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. His arms ached, and his vision blurred. The cold bit into his skin, and the whispers clawed at his mind. But he stood firm. Every step the Vossar took toward Alara, he forced them back. Behind him, the device's hum reached a fever pitch. The light from the crystal grew brighter, bathing the sanctuary in a pure, radiant glow. Nathan could feel the warmth of it, pushing back the cold, and for the first time, the Vossar shrank away. Alara, now, he shouted. The Zyran girl pressed a final sequence on the panel, and the device exploded with light. Waves of energy cascaded through the sanctuary, washing over Nathan and blasting the shadows into nothingness. The mist evaporated, and the whispers died, leaving only silence. Nathan dropped to his knees, breathing hard. The plasma cutter slipped from his hands, and he let the warmth of the light envelop him. They had done it. For now. But deep down, he knew the battle wasn't over yet. The Vossar's darkness lingered, and the real fight was still to come. Nathan and Alara moved through the ruins, the air still humming with the fading light of the sanctuary. The mist had receded, but the shadows still clung to the corners, watching them with unseen eyes. Every step echoed, bouncing off ancient stone and dying in the deep, dark tunnels ahead. Their path wound through crumbling arches and broken statues, each turn revealing more of the temple's secrets and its dangers. Alara's silver hair shimmered faintly, the only light in the dim corridor. She held a small orb in her hand, its glow a gentle blue, casting long shadows as they walked. The ancient device had done its job, but the core of the Vossar's power still lay ahead, hidden deep within the temple's heart. "We're getting close," she whispered. Her violet eyes narrowed, and the light of the orb reflected in their depths. "I can feel it." Nathan nodded. His plasma cutter was ready in his hand, its blade a steady hum of energy. His body ached from the last battle, but his mind was sharp. "If we find the source, can we destroy it?" Alara hesitated. "Maybe. If the crystal holds, we can overload the energy core. But it will be dangerous." "Dangerous is better than dead," Nathan said, flashing a quick grin. It was more to keep his own nerves steady than anything else. They pushed on, their footsteps growing softer as the stone beneath them turned to a strange, glassy material. The walls pulsed with a faint red light, like veins beneath translucent skin. The air was warmer here, thick and heavy, and a low thrumming sound filled the space, like a giant heartbeat. Alara's hand tightened around the glowing orb. "The Vossar feed off this energy. It's why they're so strong here." "Then let's turn off the buffet," Nathan muttered. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, lost in shadows, and the floor sloped down to a pool of shimmering black liquid. At the center of the pool stood a monolith, a spire of dark crystal, jagged and pulsing with red light. The very air around it seemed to twist, bending reality into strange, shifting patterns. The Vossar were there. Dozens of them moved along the edges of the room, their forms rippling in and out of the mist. Their hollow eyes were fixed on the monolith, their whispers blending with the thrum of the crystal. When Nathan and Alara entered, every head turned. "Stay close," Nathan said, his voice low. Alara nodded. She raised the orb, and its light flared, pushing the mist back. The Vossar recoiled, their shapes distorting. But they did not flee. Instead, they moved with purpose, closing in, their long limbs stretching like shadows cast by a dying flame. Nathan stepped forward, his plasma cutter cutting through the air. Each swing sent arcs of blue light through the mist, and each hit tore through the Vossar, sending wisps of darkness curling away. But for every creature he struck down, more seemed to rise from the shadows, drawn by the monolith's call. Alara moved with him, her free hand tracing symbols in the air. The orb pulsed, and beams of light shot out, carving paths through the mist. She chanted softly, her voice steady, and the air around them shimmered with a protective aura. They reached the edge of the pool. The black liquid rippled, and from its depths, a massive form began to rise. It was Vossar, but unlike the others. Its body was a swirling storm of shadows, its eyes twin pits of molten red. It towered over them, its mouth stretching into a grin filled with endless teeth. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. Alara. She didn't answer. Instead, she held the orb high, and its light burned brighter. The shadows around them screamed, the mist pulling away as if from a flame. The monolith's light flickered, and the massive Vossar hissed, its form shifting and breaking apart. Now, Alara cried. Nathan didn't hesitate. He threw his plasma cutter, the blade spinning through the air. It struck the monolith with a sharp crack, and for a moment, everything went still. Then the world exploded with light. The shadows burned away, the mist dissolved, and the monolith shattered, sending shards of dark crystal into the pool below. The giant Vossar let out a final piercing scream before it collapsed, its body unraveling into nothingness. When the light faded, the chamber was empty. The air was clear, the shadows gone. Only the ruins remained, silent, ancient, and at peace. Nathan lowered his arm, his hand still outstretched. Alara stepped to his side, her orb dim but still glowing. "It's over," she said, her voice soft but filled with strength. "For now," Nathan replied, but a hint of a smile touched his lips. The true battle might not be over, but they had won this fight. And as long as they stood together, there was hope. Nathan and Alara stood at the edge of the shattered monolith, the air still humming with the energy of their victory. The chamber, once filled with mist and shadows, now lay in eerie silence. The black pool at their feet had turned into still, glassy water, reflecting the jagged remains of the dark crystal. But neither of them allowed themselves to relax. Something still felt wrong. Alara's violet eyes remained fixed on the ruins of the monolith. The orb in her hand, now a dull blue, pulsed weakly as if exhausted. "The Vossar's link to this place is broken," she said. "But the energy, it's not dispersing. It's building." Nathan's grip tightened on his plasma cutter, though the blade had dimmed and the charge was nearly spent. Building. What does that mean? "It means this temple isn't just a source of power. It's a bomb," Alara replied, her voice steady but urgent. "The Vossar were using it to draw energy, but now it's unstable. If we don't find a way to shut it down, it could take out this entire planet." Nathan's eyes widened. "Then we need to move. Where's the core?" Alara closed her eyes, focusing. The orb flickered and faint blue lines appeared on the floor, leading deeper into the temple. "This way." They sprinted through the winding corridors, their footsteps echoing off the ancient stone. The walls seemed to pulse with red light, each beat faster than the last. The entire structure felt alive, like they were running through the veins of a dying beast. "There's a lock," she said, her brow furrowing. "A puzzle. The Vossar used this to keep intruders out." Nathan looked over the symbols, strange, twisting shapes that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Can you solve it?" Alara nodded, but sweat beaded on her forehead. "I can try. Keep watch." While Alara worked, Nathan turned to face the dark corridor behind them. The shadows were moving. Even with the monolith destroyed, remnants of the Vossar lingered, crawling along the walls and seeping from the cracks. They had lost their form, reduced to writhing masses of darkness. But they were still dangerous. One of the shadows lunged, and Nathan reacted instinctively. His plasma cutter flared to life, cutting through the mist-like creature. It hissed and dissolved, but more were coming. "Hurry, Alara," he called out, slashing at another shadow. Alara's fingers danced over the symbols, the orb in her hand glowing brighter with each touch. The door responded, lines of blue light spreading through the crystal, pushing back the red. Almost. There. A loud click echoed through the chamber. The doors shuddered and slowly began to open, revealing a chamber filled with light. At the center stood a crystalline heart, pulsing with raw energy. It was beautiful and terrifying, a swirling core of blue and red, caught in a constant storm of light. "That's it," Alara said, her voice filled with awe and dread. "The core of the temple." Nathan took a step forward, but the shadows recoiled from the light, gathering at the edges of the room. "Can we shut it down?" Alara hesitated. "Yes, but it will take everything the orb has left. And once it's done, the temple will collapse. We'll need to get out fast." Nathan glanced back at the shadows, then at Alara. "Do it. I'll hold them off." She didn't argue. She moved to the core, pressing the orb against its surface. Blue light began to spread, the red energy recoiling. The temple shuddered, dust falling from the ceiling as the structure began to react to the disturbance. Nathan stood guard, his plasma cutter a dim, flickering light against the darkness. The shadows crept closer, their whispers growing louder, but he held his ground. As the core began to dim, the temple's rumbling intensified. The walls cracked, and the floor shifted beneath them. Alara turned, her face pale but determined. "It's done. Run." Without hesitation, they dashed back through the corridors, the temple collapsing around them. Stones fell, shadows snapped at their heels, and the ground crumbled underfoot. But they moved as one, their steps in sync, their breaths sharp and fast. Ahead, a sliver of light marked the exit. Nathan pushed forward, grabbing Alara's hand as the final archway collapsed behind them. They tumbled into the open air, just as the temple imploded, sending a shockwave through the jungle. When the dust settled, only a crater remained. The dark energy was gone, the Vossar's presence erased. Nathan lay on his back, breathing hard. Alara sat beside him, the shattered remains of the orb in her hand. She looked at him, and for the first time, a real smile broke through her usual calm. "We did it," she whispered. "Yeah," Nathan replied, grinning up at the sky. "But I'm never taking the shortcut through space again." Alara laughed, and in that moment, despite the ruins and the danger still out there in the universe, everything felt right. Nathan and Alara sat on the edge of the massive crater, watching as the last wisps of smoke rose from the ruins of the temple. The once threatening jungle around them had grown quiet, its eerie whispers replaced by the natural sounds of birds and rustling leaves. The planet, once under the shadow of the Vossar's dark influence, felt alive again. Alara held the shattered remains of the blue orb in her hands. Its fragments still pulsed faintly, like the dying embers of a fire. "The temple's energy is gone," she said softly. "The Vossar won't be able to return." Nathan let out a long breath. His clothes were torn, his face smudged with dirt, but his eyes still held their spark. "Then it's over. We actually did it." Alara turned to him, her violet eyes bright even in the dim light. "You did more than that. You saved me. You saved this world." Nathan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, you kind of saved me too. Without you, I'd probably be wandering around that forest, arguing with my own echo." She laughed, a sound that seemed to lift the weight of everything they had been through. Despite her regal bearing and her otherworldly beauty, there was a warmth to her that made Nathan feel at ease. "What now?" he asked. Alara stood, brushing dust from her robes. "We find your ship, fix the distress beacon, and get you back to your people. You've been stranded long enough." Nathan hesitated, looking back at the crater. "And what about you? Where will you go?" Alara's expression softened. "I was bound to the temple as its guardian. Now that it's gone, I am free. I could go anywhere." Nathan's heart thumped a little harder. "You could come with me. To Earth. I mean, if you want." Alara's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Earth. I've only heard stories of your world. If it's anything like you, it must be full of surprises." He grinned, the offer hanging in the air between them. Before he could say more, a low hum interrupted them. The wrist communicator Nathan had nearly forgotten about had crackled to life. "Attention. This is the rescue ship Starlance responding to a distress signal. If anyone is receiving this, respond." Nathan fumbled with the device, his voice hoarse as he shouted into it. "This is Nathan Connors. I'm alive. I'm on the planet's surface, and I'm not alone." The voice on the other end grew clearer, filled with shock and relief. "Nathan, you've been missing for weeks. Hang tight. We're locking onto your signal. We'll be there soon." He turned to Alara, his eyes wide. "They're coming." Her expression remained calm, but he saw the way her fingers tightened around the orb's shards. "Are you sure they will accept me?" Nathan reached out, taking her hand. "They'll have to. You're part of this story now. Besides, they won't be able to resist you. Trust me." Minutes later, the clouds parted, and the sleek, silver form of the rescue ship descended. Its thrusters kicked up dust, but Nathan and Alara stood their ground. As the ship's ramp lowered, uniformed figures rushed out, their faces a mix of disbelief and joy. Nathan was pulled into hugs, his name repeated over and over, but he never let go of Alara's hand. When the crew finally noticed her, silence fell. The alien girl stood tall, her violet eyes unafraid as she nodded a greeting. "This is Alara," Nathan said firmly. "She helped me survive. She's coming with us." There were whispers, a few uncertain glances, but the leader of the crew, a woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp blue eyes, stepped forward. "If she saved you, then she's welcome aboard. We owe her our thanks." Alara relaxed, and together they walked up the ramp and into the ship. As the door closed behind them and the ship lifted off, Nathan felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. He was leaving behind a world of mystery, but he was bringing something incredible with him. He looked at Alara, who sat beside him, watching the stars through the viewport. She had lost her home, but perhaps together they could build a new one. And as they soared into the vast unknown, Nathan knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning.